In the United States, how many political parties are there? And if you don't know the numbers, shout out ones that you do know.
Two.
Republican, Democrat,
Libertarian.
a Green Party.
Yeah.
What is a Green Party? I didn't know that.
The Tea Party.
Could be a Tea Party.
Libertarian Party.
All right, fine. But at the end of the day, there's not that many. You know, there's two major, and maybe there's I think there's 5 or 6 at the end of the day if you really want to look into it. Now, if I ask you the same question, how many political parties are there in Israel?
Oh.
17.
Depends on the year.
Likud
At
gets
least
one.
15.
Throw them out. Shas needs one. Blue and white needs to be represented. Yeah, religious Zionist, Labor Party, Blue. And Hope needs to be represented. Shas Party. At the end of the day, Hashem's named 26. There's 26 different parties in Israel. Okay. Now I'm asking another question. Noah, they say he was a tzaddik b'dorotav. What does he mean b'dorotav? Anyone? What does it mean he was a tzaddik b'dorotav? Right. There's 2 ways of looking at it. One way that despite his generation he was great, or only because of his generation he was looked at great. Any other generation wouldn't work. Okay, I'll ask you another question. Who, everyone knows the sin of the spies. Who is responsible for sending them? Whose idea was it? Okay, you guys should act like Hashem. Other ideas say it was Bnei Israel, right? Different ways of looking at it. Okay. I'll ask you another question. Between meat and dairy, how much time do you have to wait? You have meat, then you want dairy. Okay.
5:31.
If you look in the Gemara, where does it stem from? It stems from a rabbi who waited from meal to meal. Now, what's meal to meal? You take it literally. You have a meal, you finish your meal, and you can have meat. You can have dairy right away. Or you can look at it another way. What is it? No. It's how much time a meal to meal usually takes, which is 6 hours. Or take it in another direction. That means in the winter, if my meals are much shorter, that means, shorter distance, then maybe I should wait 4 hours, or 6 hours, or 7 hours in the summer. Meaning at the end of the day, there's 14 different answers. Now, I want to tell you guys Midrash. Midrash says like this. Rabbi Yonai says that the Torah was not given in a clear-cut manner. What does that mean? Rather, Hashem, whenever he would say a statement to Moshe, he would tell him this law, and then he would give 49 reasons why you could deem this law pure. Then right after that, he'd say, here's 49 reasons why it's impure. 98. And Moshe would say, okay, why are you telling me all this? What am I supposed to tell the people at the end of the day? And Hashem says, go by the majority. Why am I giving all this? The political parties, that they're subject. At the end of the day, in Judaism, not only is arguments inevitable, but seemingly they're intended. The arguments are intended, otherwise Hashem would have given it in a more clear-cut manner. Okay. So now I want to go on to a new part. So these are just a series of Gemara. One Gemara says like this. The Jews, they were doing Torah. The Jews, they were doing mitzvot, acts of kindness. Okay, so why was the Beit HaMikdash destroyed? Sinat China. Good. Next Gemara. Rabbi Akiva, he had 12,000 pairs of students, right? But they all passed away during the same time. And they give the reason why they all passed away. They couldn't respect each other, right? And by the way, interesting how it says 12,000 pairs, not 24,000 people. But that's. And now, a third one. We have the idea of Masechet Gittin. It says that Jerusalem was destroyed on the account of Kamsan bar Kamsan, right? And for those who aren't familiar with the story, I'll say very briefly. He was a guy who basically had a best friend and he had an enemy, and they had very similar names. And he intended to invite his best friend, yet he by mistake invited his enemy, and the enemy came to the party and he told him, you have to leave because I don't like you. And he said, no, please, I'll stay. They went back and forth. The enemy said, I'll pay for everything. Didn't let. At the end of the day, he threw him out in front of everyone. All the Chachamim were there. And that person ended up going to the Roman Caesar and telling on the Jews, and then one came to the next. The Gemara is very explicit on what led to the Beit HaMikdash destruction. Not only that, it seems like Sinat Hainam, it's not responsible for very, very basic events. It's catastrophic events. Thousands of people are dying. Buildings are being destroyed. Cities are being destroyed for this matter. Which begs the question. If arguments are intended, if arguments, you can't escape them, Hashem purposely made them, where do we draw the line between arguments and Sinat Hainam? So in order to answer that question, you need to look in the Gemara. Why do you have to look in the Gemara? Because the Gemara, if you look at it, it's just a book of arguments. Every page, argument. But yet, what is the Gemara known for? It's the book that united the entire Jewish people. So a book like that deserves looking into. So we'll start with our first example. Very famous, Bet Shammai versus Bet Hillel. Bet Shammai versus Bet Hillel, you see them all over Shas. They're constantly arguing back and forth. Law comes up, Bet Shammai says this, Bet Hillel says this. Law comes up, back and forth. And it's always almost the same result. Bet Hillel is always right, Bet Shammai is always wrong. You're reading and you say, Bet Shammai, what are you even thinking? Why did you even come? Because at the end of the day, Bet Hillel keeps winning. Now, despite this constant argument, what does the Gemara in Yevamot say? It says the children of Bet Shammai and the children of Bet Hillel, they ended up marrying each other. So you're talking about people who were viciously arguing over and over and over, yet not only are they able to coexist, but they live together. They're the same family. So what is it? So if you look in the Gemara says that Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai, when they argued L'Shem Shammai. What does it mean they argued L'Shem Shammai? It means they understood that when two ideas conflict, it's not necessarily because one is true and one is false. No, rather, and very likely, each one just represents a different perspective on what they think reality is. I mean, what does L'Shem Shammai mean? They're both trying to serve Hashem in the best way possible. So each one's coming from their own perspective on what they think the best way would be. Let's take an example. We have an example, very famous example in Masechet Shabbat. It says, how do you light the menorah? Mehadrin min ha-mehadrin. Best way possible. Obviously, Mahloket, Bet Shammai versus Bet Hillel. Bet Hillel says very simple. Day 1, 1 candle. Day 2, 2 candles. 3, 4, and so on. Bet Shammai says, no. Start day 1 with 8 candles. Then day 2, do 7 candles. Then day 3, do 6 candles. In descending order. You look at Bet Hillel, it makes a lot of sense. Day 1, 2, 2. Not only that, Bet Hillel provides its reasoning. It says, Ma'alim b'kodesh ve'en moridin. Right? That's something we believe in Judaism. Again, if you look at Bet Shammai, a reader would just gloss over him. Bet Shammai did it again. What are you thinking? But if you look into the Gemara, he provides his own reason. He says 2 things. Number 1, on day 1, you want to light 8 candles. Why do you want to light 8 candles? Because you want to look towards the future. You want to know on day 1, you have 8 days left of this great holiday. Day 2, I want to know I have a full week left. It's a futuristic perspective. A second reason I give. They say because just like the Korbanot and Sukkot, they go in descending order, and there's a whole reasoning behind it. They want to apply that same logic to the menorah. So what are we getting here? We're getting here that Bet Shammai is coming from somewhere. Bet Shammai's reasoning is sound. Bet Shammai has some grounding to it. And what's the most important part of this whole thing? Bet Hillel knew that. Bet Hillel knew it. Meaning, in other words, Bet Hillel may have been convinced that they have the real truth, right? But they still saw Bet Shammai, people who didn't share their same understanding of the truth, as good people, as people who were sincere, people who were thoughtful. They didn't look at them as enemies, yet as friends. They're just disputants. And how do we know that Bet Hillel did this? Because what does the Gemara say in Eruvin? Gemara says, why is halacha always like Bet Hillel? And they say, you know why? Because every time that they would teach their opinion, they'd always mention Bet Shammai's opinion. Not only that, furthermore, they said, every time that they told their opinion, they put Bet Shammai's opinion first. Why do you put another person's opinion first? If somebody asks you a question, you have the bottom line answer, you think you know the truth, you say the answer. Why do they put Bet Shammai's opinion first? Because they respected that opinion. They saw truth to that opinion. Yeah, at the end of the day, we have to be kover halakha. We have to choose, okay, what are we going to end up doing at the end of the day? What's the bottom line? But that doesn't mean Bet Shammai's opinion is wrong. It just means in that context, it didn't prevail. Right? And the Gemara even says that it will prevail in another context. It says in the times of Mashiach, that will be the normative halakha, whatever the reason may be. What's the Gemara trying to say? That that's a legitimate opinion, that there's some grounding behind that opinion. Next. You have Rish Lakish versus Rabbi Yochanan. Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan were Habruto. Goes like this. Rabbi Yochanan, every time he'd issue a ruling, Rish Lakish would combat him. What? 24 reasons why you're wrong, Rabbi Yochanan. And therefore, Rabbi Yochanan, he'd have to come back with 24 reasons why he's right. And Rabbi Yochanan, what does he say? He said he loved it. He said, this helped me understand the halakha so much clearer. So much so that when the Rish Lakish ended up passing away at a young age, they had to find Rabbi Yochanan a new havuta. So who did they get him? They got him the best and brightest. They got him someone who would be able to compete at his level. And every time Rabbi Yochanan said a statement, what happened? That havuta would always give him a proof why he's right. Rabbi Yochanan, I love what you're saying. Here's why you're right. Take another one. And how did Rabbi Yochanan feel? He hated it. So much so that he went into depression, and the rabbis ended up having to pray for him to die early, to get out of his uncomfortable state. What's the lesson here? Ezehu hacham almin mikol adam. Rabbi Akiva did the same thing. He on Masechet Berachot, he talked about a series of things that he learned from non-Jews. Abaye, he would constantly quote his foster mother. What do you quote? It's a Gemara. What does it show you? That not only us, we're talking about Abaye, we're talking about Rabbi Akiva, the best and brightest, the people who are responsible for transmitting our Torah are quoting from other people. People we would never think of. Meaning they understood that everybody has something to offer. That, yeah, they may think in certain contexts they're bright and everyone has something that could be respected. And we see this also in terms of halakha. Halakha, whenever you read in the Gemara, they're not presenting you with one opinion. They'll always present two opinions. They'll always present other people's opinion. Why? If at the end of the day we're only going to go by one of them, because each one has validity to it. And again, let's say an example like this. It says that the rabbis don't want us to intermingle with non-Jews. They're afraid of us marrying them. So therefore they made certain halachot to prevent this. So now, one question, so that it's something called bishul goyim, right? Bishul akum, we don't want them cooking for us. So now, the question is, does this only apply when they're cooking in our house, in their house, or is it going to apply when they're cooking in our house? Meaning, in our house we can control it, meaning we know what's going on. In their house, I get it, it's concerning we're there, we're on their territory. That's one argument. Another argument, okay, I got it, if they're doing it for free. If they're cooking for us for free, that's a nice gesture, we might come to intermingle. But what if we're paying them? It's all business at the end of the day. Both arguments, or posek, we hold like the more stringent opinion. We do care, and we don't allow it. However, what about a case where you combine the two? Where they're in your house and they're getting paid. So again, it's still up for debate, but some rabbis want to say that works. I mean, forget the halakha for a second. Both minority opinions are being combined to form a majority, to form normative halakha. Meaning, even though that wasn't majority halakha in that specific argument, it's still an opinion that's valid and worth considering that later on is going to have real ramifications. So now, and I forgot also, Abaye and then Abba, they would argue left and right, and they were buried together. Now, we have this rabbi who would recite a short prayer whenever he'd enter the Beit Midrash. And the students asked him, Rabbi, what did you say? And he'd say a bunch of things, but one thing that he'd said is, I would say that I pray when I walk into the Beit Midrash that I don't offend anybody. Does that mean that I don't offend anyone? What could we infer from that? That it was highly likely that he was going to. That throughout the arguments, the constant arguments left and right, it's possible that something could have slipped. So So now we have to step back for a second and we have to ask, why do we argue so much? Why are we such argumentative people? Story goes that Golda Meir, the Prime Minister of Israel, was with the President of the United States, Harry Truman, and Harry Truman says, you don't know how difficult it could be to lead 200 million people. Golda Meir says, yeah, you don't know how difficult it could be to lead 2 million prime ministers. Meaning, you have another example where a great military historian, he said every other army in the world, officers, they give orders. The Israeli army, they explain their orders. Right? Everyone thinks they're right in some perspective. Why is that though? Why does everyone have an opinion?
Because they are every Israeli's right.
Because at the end of the day,
Gets to say that.
at the end of the day, what does the pasuk say about us? Am Tish'a BeAb. We are a stubborn nation. Moshe complained about it over and over. Now, you could look at it and say, okay, we're a stubborn nation, we're cursed, that's it. What do you want us to do about it? But what does it mean we're Am Tish'a BeAb? Am Tish'a BeAb is the only reason we're still alive. The only reason why we prevailed for thousands of years, because we had one vision, monotheism, and we stuck with it. Abraham Avinu, that same stubbornness, that same Tish'a BeAb is what said, I don't care what anyone's saying, I'm going to do Akedat Yitzchak. That same stubbornness is, I don't care what anyone's saying, I'm going to another land, I'm going against my family. That same sense of mission. But if you think about it, Abraham Avinu, he was that guy, but at the end of the day, who was he also? He's the guy who advocated for Sodom. He's that same person that says, hey, maybe Sodom might have something to offer. Hashem, at the end of the day, no, they got nothing. Don't. But at the end of the day, Abraham Avinu, that same sense of mission, that same stubbornness, was still able to be known as the man of Hesed, the person who cares about other people, the person who can respect other people's opinions. So very often, we find ourselves fighting religious versus religious, even within Judaism. And we have a core example right before the destruction of the second Beit HaMikdash. The Romans, they surrounded us. They built a siege around us. But we kind of anticipated it. We built a strong storage, we had food, and we were built to last for a decent amount of time. We may have been the only ones, we could have been one of the only ones who survived the Roman siege. But what happened? Each person, and we said, they say back then there was 24 different groups of people. Each one had a different perspective on how to deal with the Romans. So much so, how bad did it get that one of Judaism, some Jews end up burning the entire storage of food and forcing us to fight against the Romans and eventually dying. I mean, it wasn't the Romans that defeated us, it was us. It was within ourselves. We're called B'nai Israel, even though we're 12 Shevatim. We're 12 separate tribes. Each one of us are different. Each one of us are in a different land. But at the end of the day, the Pasuk is always going to call us B'nai Israel. So now I want to just crystallize some of the takeaways. So number one, what we learned from Rish Lakish and Rabbi Hanan and Rabbi Akiva is that there's a value in learning from everybody. Everybody has something that they can offer. Number two, coming into a conversation, we need to be willing to compromise in some way, right? No one's always right, and even Hashem knew it. How do we know Hashem knew it? Hashem, after Chet HaMeraglim, he said, I'm done with this nation. Moshe comes to him, and Moshe starts to, converse with him, say what his points are. And at the end of the day, Hashem says, what does it say? Hashem reneged on what he was going to do. So if Hashem could come into a conversation and end up changing his mind, so can we. And the third one, represented by Bet Hillel, the opinion of the person on the other side of the argument, not only should be respected, it should be mentioned. It should be given credibility. Understanding that the other side has something to offer. Understanding that the other side came from a different upbringing, a different environment, a different family, different teachers. today, if you look at the Republicans and the Democrats, it's a joke. Everyone takes the Congress as a joke. Why? Because Republicans say one thing. Democrats completely disregard what they say. The Democrats say another thing, and they disregard, and then no one's talking to each other. No one cares about that, and then at the end of the day, nobody cares. It's all a joke. Don't aspire for there to be less differences at the end of the day. Everyone says, oh, we gotta stay away from mahloket. Mahloket, that's who we are. We're argumentative people. We have opinions, and we're gonna all fight for the truth at the end of the day. Don't aspire for less differences. Rather, aspire to better understand other people's perspectives. Aspire to see where other people are coming from. And then, these gemanot of sinat hinam, destroying the entire world, won't apply anymore. B'ezrat Hashem, this message, hopefully, will have listeners. Any questions? Any comments, questions? Yeah.
You said that we're supposed to, not a plan, that we're supposed to embrace our machloket, but you also have many things that say that's the thing machloket, right? To run away from fighting. And we're told that message constantly, so how do you balance the two? You know, if you could elaborate on that.
Right. So there's basically, there are some opinions that I guess can be problematic in terms of influence or whatever it is. But I guess you need to find some type of balance where, at the end of the day, what does the Gemara say? These arguments between the Siddukim and the Pirushim, this is what led to the destruction of Beit HaMikdash. Meaning it got so hostile, it got so crazy that buildings were burned, people were killed. So there you need to strike a balance. Don't let it get that hostile. You can respect, but still separate in your respective way. Right. Any other questions? Okay.
Yeah, I do have a question.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate a little bit more on this last point that you mentioned, like the Tzaddokim, you said that they ended up holding back the food, and I don't know exactly the details of the history of exactly what happened, but what could both sides have done better at the time to prevent the Beit HaMikdash from getting destroyed? Meaning, there was Tzaddokim and there's the Pirushim, and they're so polar opposite. What could have the Pirushim done to prevent that, and what could the Tzaddokim have?
I think it's what I tried to say earlier, which is each person is going to present their opinion of what the truth is. So the king, whatever, they're going to think what they think, Pirushim, they're going to think, the Zealots, they're going to think what they think at the end of the day. But understanding where the other person is coming from and not letting it escalate to the point where things like that happen is really what the balance is. I mean, coming into the conversation with respect and understanding where the person is coming from is going to make all the difference in terms of how far you can let things escalate. Okay.
Baruch.